I'm Julie Dervin. I'm the head of learning at Cargill. And about 2 years ago, I was asked to transform learning at Cargill. And so this is just a snapshot of our journey of discovery, experimentation, change, and impact. We're still very early in this journey, and by no means do we have it all figured out. But my hope is that you all are able to take some ideas and maybe some insights back to your organization as you're helping them deal with uncertainty. But before I jump in, I'd like to introduce you to Cargill. It's a big, complex organization with a rich, interesting history. Please play the video. So about 5 to 6 years ago is when we really started to be impacted by digital disruption in a very tangible way, and it's only amplified since. So how does a 154-year-old company remain competitive under such uncertain times? We needed to be faster. We needed to be more nimble, more flexible, and more agile, and more innovative. And I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with Nathan Furr's work, but he's the author of Innovator's Method. And he's also a strategy professor at INSEAD. And he says he doesn't know if he believes in competitive advantage in times of uncertainty. Rather, he believes that speed to learning is the real competitive advantage. And so as I was thinking about how we might transform learning at Cargill, I thought, if speed of learning is the real competitive advantage, then shouldn't we be doing learning differently? Because at Cargill, 6 to 10 months to design a learning program, 3 to 4 months to create a new e-learning module, 6 months and a ton of HR resource to manage a participant nomination process on an annual basis, and programs and courses that yielded a 10 to 15% capacity because in-person learning was the preferred way, and an LMS and technology experience that brought no joy, only frustration and headache. To us, it was too costly, too slow, and it wasn't serving what our organization needed. At that same time, I was thinking about how we might transform learning. There's bigger transformation unfolding in the organization. And the drumbeat at the top of the house from our CEO and executive team was a call to action for leaders to be bold, be courageous, and harness the power of an integrated operating company and solve more problems together in a more holistic way. So sure, I could propose a learning strategy with new programs that would support the new capabilities that the organization needed. But if that's all I did and I didn't change how we were doing learning, what impact would that have? And so by disrupting ourselves in L&D and pursuing a digital-first strategy, we were positioning learning as a lever for dealing with uncertainty. So how did we disrupt ourselves? We started by drafting a new learning vision. And as you can see by the words, they're not shocking, fancy, or provocative, but rather the provocation was in changing the how we did things a certain way for decades. That was really the catalyst for change. And so we needed this strategy to make sure that this strategy had undeniable business impact. And so our measures were things that our business leaders cared about: speed, scale, accessibility, efficiency, and effectiveness. So how did we get started? First, we needed to understand our learning culture. What needed to change? We needed to be extremely intent and overt about our culture. Some examples of our current culture at this time were that people were sent to learning as a way to recognize them. It was a form of recognition. We're a relationship-based organization, so traveling to learn is something our leaders appreciated. They liked when they could send their employees to a learning experience and experience a geography that otherwise they wouldn't have been able to. And because we're a relationship-based organization, in-person was the only preferred method. And those were some of the things that we needed to change. So while we pursued a digital-first strategy, and some of those cultural ideals were going away, that were now barriers for speed of learning, we had to be ready to position to talk about all the benefits that they were going to gain with this new strategy. So we also started with a series of experiments. There were a lot of new design methods and practices we wanted to try out but didn't have experience with. We were looking at new technologies, new modern platforms in the industry that we didn't have experience with. And so we found a willing partner that would go with us on this journey. And we were very strategic about who we partnered with. It was a new leader for our supply chain COE, and he was eager to make a splash. He wanted to get the organization's attention so that they could be educated on what a global supply chain really looked like. And so he was willing to go with us on this journey, and it was just high profile enough that if we achieved what we thought we would achieve, it would get the attention of others. We also, through these experiments, gathered data. So could we impact the measures we set out to impact by changing the way we design and develop learning and using different technologies? We secured 3 key sponsors that we could bring this data and sit down and have a discussion to say, if we could scale this impact, what value would it have for Cargill? So we met with our CIO to make sure that we had support for technology. We met with our CFO to ensure that we could secure the investment. And of course, our CHRO, who would champion this with other leaders across the organization. And then third, we needed to reimagine learning. So we treated it as a startup. We blank slated everything. We had to change our skills, our talent, our processes, our tools, our technology, our operating model. because we knew this type of change was more than just bringing in new technology. It was a bigger transformation. So what were the implications to our learning and development function? We needed to flip our mindsets. Our strategy was employee-centric, and so we needed to change our processes and practices. We had to look outside of our profession, and so we borrowed from non-traditional L&D practices. From marketing, we borrowed the practice of customer segmentation, segmenting our learner population, because not everyone learns the same and has the same preferences in how they like to learn. We developed learner personas that represented our workforce at a macro level that we would use in our learning design practices. And then we developed experience maps. Once we understood our learners, then we would create experience maps that represented the preferences of our learners. From IT, we borrowed agile development. And so we moved from these 6 to 10 month cycles of developing a learning program to 6 to 10 weeks, and trying to get learning in the hands of our learners as fast as possible, starting with an MVP. And then cycles of improvement, getting feedback from them. What did they find of value? What did they not find of value? And being able to make those adjustments along the way, as well as every cohort that would go through, making sure that we were staying connected with the business context. Hackathons, fast starts for first steps. We threw out the storyboards and really just brought the right people in the room and put them through design sprints to get our designs started fast. And then the last one, as we got a year into this work and we were rebuilding our core portfolio of learning experiences, we realized that the way that we were structured in our operating model in learning and development, while it served the old way, it wasn't going to enable us to scale and sustain this new way. And so we borrowed a DevOps mindset from IT because we needed design, development, and delivery all working continuously together, aligned to their learning products. Another implication were the new capabilities that we needed in learning and development. And so as we started this journey, reading a lot of research, a lot of the Burson papers, and those papers would talk about all the different skills or the new skills that were needed in learning and development. And I never really understood, well, if I brought those skills in, how would I use them? And so it wasn't until we got about a year under our belt and started using some of these other practices and bringing in new technology and platforms to automate and convert our learning into digital experiences did I understand why we needed these capabilities. User experience design, innovation, agile, data science and analytics, marketing and communications. We no longer are facilitating in-person learning, and they're in the classroom and able to observe how the learners are engaging with the learning. So we needed to understand how to use data relative to our learner behaviors to understand how they were engaging with the learning in order to inform continuous improvements. And digital literacy and technical aptitude, these are fast becoming the core skills that we need across the team, not in just one area of L&D. And a third implication was a realization that our role in L&D in the organization was shifting, and how we create value for the organization was starting to look very different. Once we rebuilt our core portfolio of digital learning experiences, our custom learning design started to significantly decrease. Our in-person classroom training was almost non-existent. Logistics, coordination decreased, and our reliance on internal IT support decreased as well. As I mentioned, we were using data to monitor learner behaviors so that we could inform our continuous improvement of our learning. We were actually working more directly with our leaders, leadership teams, and subject matter experts, getting them in tools like Degreed to curate their learning and build their own pathways. We were working with leaders on how to engage differently with digital learning. So traditionally, we think of leaders teaching leaders in a classroom facilitation session. In a digital design, this starts to look very different. So we have to get our leaders comfortable with just-in-time videos. So as learners in their digital experiences are having discussions and topics and questions are unfolding, our leaders could see what was on the minds of our learners and be able to shoot a just-in-time video to bring context to that learning. So methods like that we started to incorporate. And this is how our role started to look different. So then what is the impact? As I mentioned, we're still early in this journey, and we have a lot of things that we still have to learn and uncover. But to date, our speed, as I mentioned, from our time that we've identified a learning need to the time that we get some learning in the hands of the learners has gone from 6 to 10 months to 6 to 10 weeks. Our response times have significantly decreased, with the ability to just get our SMEs, get our stakeholders into a platform like Degreed and showing them how to use it so they can be more accountable for their learning. Scale, our ability to exponentially scale. As I mentioned earlier, our programs and the way that we were running them really only had a 10 to 15% capacity of the total learner population that needed learning in a given year. And now we're able to scale according to the organizational needs. Accessibility. Part of our strategy was about democratization of learning. So instead of using a nomination and selection process, because we only had limited capacity, and you had to be selected to be able to participate in the learning, we now could open up all learning and make it accessible to all employees and empower them to access the learning that they need to be successful in their jobs, as well as the learning that they needed to grow in their careers. And efficiency. On average, delivering using these digital methods, we have decreased our per learner delivery cost from 40 to 70%, which caught our CFO's attention. And then the next question is, sure, we can achieve scale, we can achieve speed, we can achieve accessibility and efficiency, but are the learners engaging with it, and is it having an impact? And so we have both qualitative and quantitative data that tells us they prefer this method over the traditional methods, which was very interesting because we would have most of our conversations with our leadership saying, you know what, they're not going to engage with digital learning. This isn't the way we learn. This isn't our culture. And a lot of resistance to it that we had to overcome, those cultural norms that we had to overcome. But when we went straight to our learners to understand how they preferred to learn and designed the learning according to those preferences, there was little to no change management, and they were highly engaged. And on a 1 to 5 scale of how satisfied they were with the learning, on average, our digital learning experiences were scoring 1.5 points higher than our traditional. So I'm often asked, what's the bigger plan? Where are we going with this? How are we going to achieve this vision? So we put together what we call 3 horizons of purposeful opportunity. So we've been in Horizon 1, which was about building our own digital learning capabilities, new tools, new skills, new technologies. And we're soon pushing into Horizon 2, which was about taking those capabilities and now working with our businesses to build their own digital learning capabilities and get them in the tools so they can be more accountable and own more of the learning for their population. The second part of that is building their capabilities so that they could formalize more customer-facing education strategies by using these tools and methods. And then the third horizon is what really connects learning to our broader purpose at Cargill, which is to nourish the world in a safe, responsible, and sustainable manner. So if we could use these capabilities to empower all employees to keep their skills competitive and relevant, regardless if they worked in an office, if they were on the road, or if they worked in a plant, if we could do this, we all win. And then finally, we like to talk about all the challenges and struggles as well, and I'll position mine as insights, learnings that I've had along the way, which came from struggle and challenge. So the first one, commit and challenge. Along the way, yes, we were met with a lot of resistance and questions and asked to refine the strategy, asked to maybe not be as aggressive with the strategy, to slow down, to maybe only focus on certain areas and not other areas. But the fact of the matter was, the impact was undeniable, and it aligned directly to what the organization was needing and asking for. So we pursued. Go direct to your learners. I can't stress this more. We ended up in a lot of debate with a lot of our HR partners and a lot of our leaders, what learning method would work, how we should design things, what learners liked, what they didn't like. Our learners don't learn that way. Go direct to your learners. They will inform you how they prefer to learn. Clear vision and empowered team. There are a lot of partners that we needed to have on board with this vision along the way to make the amount of progress we've been able to make in just 2 short years. So spend the time up front with your IT, with your legal, with your broader HR business partner population, with your sourcing and procurement. Because when they understand and believe in where you are going, they too will be creative in how they solve problems as you have to move forward. And it's different than just understanding your strategy and vision. Getting them engaged and viscerally connected to what you're trying to accomplish and being part of something bigger. And then finally, show me over tell me. I would have saved a lot of time doing presentations and creating decks if I would have just started out with this. When we talk about digital learning, there's a lot of connotations as to what digital learning is. And so typically, or at least in Cargill, when we say digital learning, they revert back to their old mental models of e-learning modules, recorded webinars with maybe some Q&A or an assessment at the end. And so it wasn't until we started getting them in the tools, like Degreed, having them participate in our digital cohort-based learning experiences until they really understood where it was we were going and how it could have the impact that we needed it to have. So show me over tell me. So as I mentioned, we're still early in this journey and we still have a lot to learn, but we've made a lot of progress in a short amount of time. We have evidence all over Cargill that the organization is embracing learning as a whole organization responsibility. And in learning and development, we are moving into more of a role of stewards of our organizational culture, making sure that we're bringing the most modern thinking, modern expertise, processes, technology, and infrastructure, so that collectively we can learn at speed and make sure that that is really our true competitive advantage. Thank you. So I think we have a little time for 1 or 2 questions. Hello.
Hello, my name's Jordan. I'm with Lifetime. So one thing that stuck out to me was just there at the end, you're talking about go to the front line, go to your learners. They will tell you how they want to learn. How do you handle that conflict or that discord when the learners are telling you they want instructor-led, but you're trying to kind of enforce this culture shift of speed of learning and everything's digital?
Yeah, that's a great question. And with Cargill, it was so interesting. We did a lot of focus groups. So when we were developing those personas and understanding, what type of learning they needed to be successful, what frustrated them with the current environment, what devices did they like to use? Were they always on the road? Did they work in an office? So building those personas, and we designed according to what they told us they wanted. And we didn't hear anyone say that they wanted instructor-led training. They wanted in-person learning. They said, we don't have time for that. Traveling and stepping outside of work would be a nice break, but we just don't have time for that. So it would really be great if we could access learning on our devices, on our own time, in our preferred methods. So we really didn't come across that, which is interesting because Cargill is not known for, being on the leading edge of technology. We will be soon. We have a lot of work to do, but it was very interesting.
Hi, thank you so much for a great presentation. I really took a lot of great notes, first of all. Buy-in, so important. HR, IT, any best practices to get that early adoption?
I just want to make sure I heard your question. So did you ask, were there any best practices as we partnered with HR, IT, and other areas to get that early adoption? Is that, okay, great. Great question. Well, we brought them all in from the beginning. When we were shaping our vision and we were creating the personas and the experience maps, and we were prioritizing the digital learning capabilities that we needed to build, we had our procurement in there. We had our IT partners, our security partners, a lot of our HR partners. We included them in that process of creating that vision, creating some of those new artifacts that would guide our direction, and then being involved in the prioritization of the digital capabilities we would build. And so because of that, for example, with IT, then once we had that first part defined, then we moved into sessions to architect our learning technology ecosystem. So they already understood and were bought in, and now we could engage in some really rich conversations around what type of technology architecture did we need to enable the capabilities we needed to build, but bringing them in up front and spending that time.
Hi. I think one of your earlier slides, you illustrated that you adopted a DevOps mindset. I'm assuming that's within your learning and development team itself. Can you probably share with us some of the culture and change challenges you may have had to push through in changing our current mindset to a DevOps mindset?
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things that we didn't really realize what an impact it would have at the time, but while we were doing an organizational vision and strategy, we also had to redo our entire leadership and executive development strategy at the same time. And so we were very intentional about making sure that the solutions we were designing incorporated digital learning. So digital learning for our top executives. And so a lot of the challenges were, I would get pulled aside and, with an executive saying, Julie, I know there's digital. I just don't know if I learn that way. Is this going to be hard? How are we going to navigate this? And we just said, don't worry, we've got you. We'll get you in there. It's so easy. And so part of what helped us was at the time that we were moving forward with this digital learning strategy and needing some of that open mind to try something new and different, we had our top leaders experiencing it. And the organization and our CEO was in full support of it because digitalization and analytics was a key capability we had to build in our organization. And if our top leaders weren't building that capability and willing to engage with digital in their day-to-day work, how were they going to lead organizations that we needed to incorporate that into their strategies? So that really helped a lot and opened up and pushed through some of the barriers. So I think we're out of time. Thank you for the questions, and thank you for the opportunity to tell our story.